Scientists have somehow missed it because I don't know how to say this, but no one else seems to be talking about this.
Now, the structure that you think is Atlantis.
The lost city of Atlantis is one of the most widely known legends around the world, and although scholars, historians, and scientists have been searching for years, they still haven't found it. Well, it just might be because they were looking in all the wrong places. Joe Rogan recently had research journalist Jimmy Corsetti on his show, where he revealed what could very well be the location of the lost city of Atlantis. And it isn't at the bottom of the ocean. So the real question is this truly the location of the ancient city of Atlantis? And why is it on land instead of under the ocean? Well, stick around to find out. Joe Rogan is known to specialize in widely unorthodox theories and facts, and on this particular episode of the Joe Rogan Experience, he brought in Jimmy Corsetti, who happens to be an expert on the topic of finding the lost city of Atlantis. In this episode, they discussed the possibility of the lost city of Atlantis being located inland in the Sahara Desert, and not at the bottom of the Atlantic. The tale of Atlantis, as told by Plato, is widely known, an ancient civilization that existed 11,600 years ago, with advanced knowledge far beyond its time. That was before the entire city was swept away by the ocean, completely wiping out any traces of this once powerful civilization. Following Plato's descriptions, historians and archaeologists have always assumed that if Atlantis did exist, its location would be at the bottom of the ocean by Plato's accounts. But as it turns out, Jimmy Corsetti has revealed compelling evidence that places the location of the lost city not at the bottom of the Atlantic, but smack in the middle of the Sahara Desert. The lost location. According to Corsetti, the lost city of Atlantis is what is now known as the Rishat structure, or the Eye of the Sahara. This is a geological formation located in Mauritania that was originally thought to be an impact crater, but its overall elevation, which is around 400 feet, have led archaeologists to believe it might have a different origin. The Eye of the Sahara is a nearly symmetrical structure with several concentric circles, each one bigger than the one it encloses, as seen from space. The Rishat structure's peculiar shape is one, if not the closest match to Plato's description of what the ancient city of Atlantis looks like. By Plato's account, Atlantis wasn't just a single city, but was in fact a vast empire, made up of 10 kingdoms, spread across what is now today Northern Africa and Western Europe. The lost city of Atlantis was actually the capital and is what Plato described in detail in his text. This capital city was said to be made up of concentric circles, 2 of water and 3 of land. This description matches the symmetry of the Rishat structure, as seen from space, and is only the first of many clues discussed by Corsetti. This is one of the major clues that have spurred many to believe that the Rishat structure just might be the lost city of Atlantis after all. This is because all previous presumed locations of the lost city lacked this key component, but there's more. Plato also described the capital city of Atlantis to have an opening to the sea of the south, which correctly matches the southern edge of the Rishat structure, as it appears to have this same characteristic. It also has what appears to be an outward directional flow of salt and sand, which would mean water flowed out through this southern entrance at some point. Evidence of seawater and salt. When viewing aerial photos of the Rishat structure, there are white straits clearly visible in and around those concentric circles. These white patches are in fact salt. So, how, you might ask, did large packets of sea salt covering long stretches of surface area end up in the middle of the Sahara Desert? Well, as it turns out, the Sahara is covered with salt patches, but the Rishat structure remains one of the highest depositions of surface salt in the desert. This indicates that at some point in the last 12,000 years, huge amounts of ocean water existed or at least blasted over much of this area, in vast amounts enough to cover hundreds of miles. This is particularly significant when you remember Plato described the destruction of Atlantis as being swept away by waves of ocean, which could mean some massive tsunami. But this contradicts the widely accepted science that the last time the ocean water flowed through the Sahara was over 60 million years ago, and not 12,000 years. This evidence of recent water flow is clear when you simply take a wide-out view of the areas surrounding the Rishat structure. You can clearly see what could only be fluvial lines of water receding or flowing over the Sahara and into the Atlantic Ocean. Another small striking similarity is that, according to Plato, Atlantis was said to be made up of red, black and white coloured stones, which also happens to make up the vast majority of the surface stones found in and around the Richat structure. He also states that the center island of Atlantis had springs of hot and cold water, which in today's world are known as hot springs. Well, there is a scientific study from the late 90s that found that the Richat structure itself is a hydrothermal complex, which means that it could very well have had both hot and cold springs, some 12,000 when waste flowed through the surface. Also, another fact why the Richat structure makes for a compelling location for the lost city of Atlantis is that Plato described Atlantis as having vast mountain ranges to the north. Well, there is a long stretch of mountains in northern Mauritania, known as the Atlas Mountains. But get this, these mountains were named after the first king of Mauritania, whose name was Atlas, which also happens to be the name of the very first king of Atlantis, whose name was also Atlas. The Green Sahara. According to Plato, Atlantis was destroyed some 11,600 years ago, and we've just seen that vast amounts of ocean water must have flowed through the Sahara some 12,000 years ago. If you think that's just a coincidence, here's another mind-blowing fact. Multiple scientific studies have it that the Sahara Desert was a lush green landscape with tropical climates and some of the largest bodies of inland lakes in the world, including mega Lake Chad. But around 11 to 12,000 years ago, some cataclysmic flooding events turned the tides of the Sahara, washing through the vegetative landscape and slowly leaving behind a desert wasteland. This peculiar timing of 12,000 years also fits the time frame of the Younger Dryas, which could be the culprit behind the cataclysmic flooding that washed through the Sahara, taking all traces of Atlantis with it. The Younger Dryas was a period of abrupt change in Earth's weather patterns, marking the end of the last ice age, when the northern hemisphere began to warm, leading to slow but massive deglaciation. According to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, during the abrupt end of the Younger Dryas, which was around 11 to 12,000 years ago, glaciers had melted significantly, leading to a significant rise in sea levels. And although it is yet to be proven, it doesn't take a genius to make the connections between a rise in sea levels and a drastic flooding in what would have been the Sahara Desert. There are also studies into other events that might have occurred towards the end of the Younger Dryas that could also explain Plato's account of the earthquakes and massive flooding that destroyed the city of Atlantis. This very well could have been the cause of the catastrophic chain of events that led to the complete destruction of the lost city of Atlantis. To many, the lost city of Atlantis remains nothing more than a myth, but these lines of evidence are too compelling to ignore. What do you think?